I'm Stacia Gar. I'm co-founder of RedThread Research. We're a human capital research advisory membership firm, and we focus on some of the most interesting problems in HR, the things where there's tons of noise and lots of people trying to convince you of other things. And our job is to provide high quality, unbiased research on things like AI and skills and learning. So it's really the most fun place to be in HR. The data on the use of AI in the workplace is really interesting because we're hearing all this noise from vendors. Every vendor you look at is telling you, we have AI. Our data shows in a recent study we just completed that 90% of vendors said we have AI. Not surprising. But then we asked their customers, what percent of you think that your vendors have AI? And it was only 40%. And it was really interesting because when we then dug into it and we looked at those vendors by time since deployment, we found that those who were earlier in their deployment had really strong feelings, like, yes, we absolutely have AI, and then it dropped off over time, which indicates to us that there's a lot of noise and excitement about AI, but then when people dig under the hood a little bit, there's still some questions about how it's being deployed, rolled out, how useful it is, and the like. And we actually know the question about usefulness is there because of the fact that when we asked about the relationship between having AI and renewal, likelihood to renew, we found that the existence of AI did not impact renewal. So right now, lots of enthusiasm, but not as much value as I think we're going to see in the years to come. From our clients, we're hearing a lot about safety of AI. We're hearing about security. We're hearing about how do we make sure that we understand how to use this appropriately from a responsible AI perspective, but then also just how do we help people adopt it? How do we help them be more efficient? How do we use it in a way that will make them more effective? And as I think further down the road, if we're able to do those things, what are we going to do with this time that we have on our hands that we didn't have before? And how can we use that most to benefit them as individuals and the organization more broadly? So I think it's really interesting. Right now, we're hearing about a lot of experimentation with AI. So for instance, if you look at the Microsoft LinkedIn study, the Workplace Trends Index, we know that a lot of people are experimenting with AI. But what's super interesting about that as well is a lot of them are not telling their employer that they're experimenting with AI. And yet, when we hear what we're telling HR and what we're seeing more broadly, it's just experiment, experiment, experiment. So there's kind of this weird thing happening right now. And I think we're about to move out of that phase from experiment to what I would call expand. And expand means that, one, we're going to see more scale of AI in the organization. So instead of this individualized experimentation, we're going to see a broader expansion of AI across the organization in a more coherent way and a lot more clarity around what we want folks to adopt and do differently. The second point is going to be around an expansion of use cases and approaches. So right now we have had a number of frontier models, but we've kind of had some ways that we're using it that are not terribly specialized. So we might have had, folks just using ChatGPT to do certain things, but there isn't a specialized knowledge set within that particular model. I think we're going to begin to see an expansion of those different types of insights and specialties of those different models that is different than what we've been seeing. And that will make those use cases and the value of those different types of AI much more apparent to folks who are using them. I think the third type of expansion is going to be around our processes and practices and the way that we are even thinking about using AI. Because right now, a lot of the talk is about efficiency. And efficiency is great, and we've got tons of opportunity for it. But what we really want to do is be thinking about how can we get to the work being completed differently? Does that work even still need to be done given the capabilities we have? And I think that expansion of process and approach is going to be very different from the current efficiency focus we have right now. We haven't been doing this long enough to have a right. We still have a lot of experimentation. So I wouldn't say that anybody has done AI and HR right. But what I think some people have done is they have begun to think about what some of those alternative approaches could be that are not just efficiency. So they've begun to think about, okay, what might we be able to do differently with the AI that is not saying we're going to just do this faster, but actually come at the problem from a completely different angle. So if you think about things, for instance, like data and analytics, right? We have had a situation where we have been telling HR practitioners for a long time that you need to be more data savvy, more analytical, etc. And we have been pushing training, and we have been doing all this stuff to try to get there. But for many, that isn't their strength. That isn't why they're in learning or they're in HR. And it makes sense that that's not where they're focused. But with AI and its capabilities, we're going to be able to say, hey, that's okay. That's cool. You don't need to have to do that. Instead, we're going to give you insights that are already customized because it knows the context. It's going to give you suggestions on what to do differently. And it's going to embed that into the places where people are already doing the work. And so we're going to have to get to stop banging our heads against this old problem because we simply have a new capability to not deal with that problem, but instead move on to enabling people to do things that they're really great at. They are thrilled about the potential, but I want to bring us back to the reality, which is right now they are not seeing it. And so I think where it's incumbent on our space is to provide really good examples of what this looks like in real life, and then to be able to follow through, particularly past 6 months of deployment, according to our data, to enable people to actually achieve those results that they're hoping for. Once we get there, I think it's going to be like wildfire. What we've seen so far has been a big debate around augmentation versus automation. And much of the work we're talking about automation, whether that's content automation or recommendation automation, that I think we're going to see us work through and figure out in the next, let's call it 18 months, 2 years, probably sooner. But I'm very sensitive to my clients who are saying, Stacia, it's not getting there as fast as you think. But I think we're going to handle a lot of that automation stuff relatively quickly. But then as we look to the future, the augmentation, the idea that you can be doing the work that you're doing and come up against something that's a little bit difficult, and the learning may pop right up there in the flow of the work that you're doing, and that it won't be some generic learning path, but it's going to actually be the thing that you need to know right then, right there to do the thing. I think that is the difference. It's also going to look like coaching in the flow of the work that you're doing, giving you feedback on, okay, maybe that wasn't the right approach, or maybe, Stacia, you are talking way too much in this meeting and you could dial it back. That's the type of information. It's going to be a very different way of looking at learning because we have this ability to have it so much more highly personalized and in the right place at the right time. If this goes well, we could live in a world where many of the things that drive us a bit crazy about working, particularly in larger organizations, could fall away, right? Whether that is the reports that you have to do or the mandatory learning that you have to do, or some of these things that are just, let's be honest, for many of us, just kind of like a little bug in our side. I think that really could be less of a day-to-day experience. And what will that enable us to do? I am not so foolhardy as to think that will enable us all to drink margaritas by the beach, but I do think that it will enable us to have more time to think more critically about what we're doing, to ask better questions, to connect with other people more and better, and to hopefully be able to meet other people where they are because we're not so distracted by some of these other things around us. That's my hope and aspiration for where we could be. I love using AI to plan recipes with things that are already in my refrigerator on a personal level. And so I will go in and I'll say, I have these 6 things. Please give me 4 different recipes, all of them child-friendly. And I get some pretty good options. So on the work front, on the personal front, that's my favorite use case. On the work front, we have been using it to help us with coding comments, which is not necessarily so exciting, but as a researcher who spent a lot of time reading survey responses, the ability to code is amazing. So that is one of the things I have been doing. Again, though, like even for us, right, that's an efficiency thing. Like we are not yet totally redoing how we are approaching our research work with AI, but that has to come. For those who are looking at vendors with new AI capabilities, you should be asking them a few questions. First, you should be making sure that you understand what's happening with your data and how that is being potentially used within the model. We just completed a study where we found about a third of vendors are using the customer's data as part of their model. A third of them are training customer-specific models. So it's still being used by the vendor, but it's being kept kind of within a sandbox for the specific customer, and then a third are not. And that's a lot of variability, and the way that your data are being used can introduce some real risk into your organization. So I would be really thoughtful to understand what's happening with your data. Secondarily, I would also be asking questions about security. We found in our recent survey that only 54% of the vendors were SOC 2 certified, which SOC 2 goes beyond AI, obviously, but as we introduce more AI, there's more potential for risk and other types of attacks that could be dangerous. So you want to ask questions about security. Third, as everybody says, you want to understand what's happening with the AI as much as possible. And along with this goes, don't just accept that because someone says, hey, we've got AI or we've got Gen AI, like you're like, okay, great. Like, no, that is not, you need to actually understand what it's doing, what type of AI, and the training approach for the AI. And then the last thing I would be asking about is their approach to responsible, ethical, safe AI, because there are, according to our data, only about a third of vendors who are really taking that seriously. The rest of them are doing a lot of hand waving. And if that is something that matters to you, you need to make sure that you are making sure that your vendors are talking to you about it and making clear to them that that is an important decision criteria for you.